The Texas desert burned beneath a pitiless sun, stretching out in endless waves of gold and dust. The heat shimmered in the distance like ghosts of fire, and the wind whispered across the dunes, carrying the scent of sage and death. Jack Callahan rode slowly, his horse's hooves crunching on the dry earth. His canteen was nearly empty, and his patience was thinner than the horizon line. He'd been riding for 2 days without seeing a soul, until he heard it. At first it was faint, almost a trick of the wind, a sound soft enough to be mistaken for an echo, a voice trembling and weak. Jack reined in his horse, scanning the barren landscape. Again it came, "Help!" The word barely rose above the rasp of the wind. His brow furrowed. He swung down from his saddle, boots sinking into the hot sand, and began to follow the sound. Behind a low outcrop of rocks he found her. A girl, young, no older than 20, lying half-buried beneath sand and thorn brush. Her dark hair was matted, her skin cracked from the sun, her lips split and dry. The beaded necklace around her neck marked her as Comanche. Her chest rose shallowly, each breath a struggle. Jack knelt beside her, his shadow falling across her face. "Miss?" he said softly, uncertain if she was still alive. Her eyelids fluttered and her parched lips moved. "Please, don't let me die." He felt something twist inside him, something he hadn't felt in years. Without hesitation, he pulled the cork from his canteen and tipped a few drops of water onto her lips. She tried to drink but coughed weakly. He lifted her head, cradling it in his rough hands, letting her sip again. The cowboy looked around. No footprints, no wagon, no camp. Whoever had left her here was long gone. The sun was sinking fast. Night in the desert would kill her as surely as the heat. Jack took a deep breath, knowing what he had to do. "All right, girl," he muttered, sliding his arms beneath her weightless body. "You're coming with me." As he lifted her onto his horse, the wind picked up again, a lonely sound that seemed to mourn along with him. He didn't know who she was or why fate had crossed their paths, but as he rode toward the distant hills, he knew this night would change everything. By the time Jack reached the abandoned line shack, dusk had swallowed the desert. The air was cooling fast, and the first coyotes had begun to howl in the distance. The shack stood crooked against the dying light. 4 rotting walls, a half-collapsed roof, and a rusted stove that hadn't burned in years. But to Jack it was shelter enough. He laid the girl gently on a pile of old burlap sacks, brushing dust from her hair. Her breathing was shallow, her face pale beneath the grime. He knelt beside her, struck a match, and lit the fire in the old stove. The orange glow filled the room, chasing away the darkness and throwing long shadows across the walls. Jack fetched what little water he had left and tore strips from his undershirt to clean her wounds. Her arms were scratched raw from brush and cactus, and her ankles were swollen. She had walked until her body could no longer carry her. As he worked, she stirred, her lashes fluttering. Her eyes opened, deep and dark like the riverbeds after a storm. She looked frightened, confused, then tried to push his hands away. "No," she whispered hoarsely. "Don't hurt me." Jack froze.
"Easy, miss."
"You're safe now." His voice was rough, but there was a gentleness in it. He didn't even recognize himself. "Ain't no one gonna hurt you here." She blinked at him, trying to focus, and then her gaze fell to the small cross pinned to his vest. "You're soldier?" she asked, her voice trembling. Jack hesitated before answering. "Used to be," he said quietly. "Not anymore." Her shoulders relaxed slightly, though her eyes still held caution, the kind born from too much pain. He covered her with his blanket and fed the fire more wood, letting the warmth fill the cold shack. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Only the crackle of fire and the soft sound of the wind slipping through. The cracks in the walls broke the silence. When she finally slept, Jack sat by the door, staring into the night. He'd seen death before, too much of it, but something about saving this one life felt different. As the flames flickered, he whispered to himself, "Don't die on me, girl. Not after I found you." Outside, the desert was silent again, but inside, a spark of hope had been lit. Morning came quietly. The pale light of dawn crept through the cracks in the cabin walls, painting thin golden lines across the floorboards. The fire had burned low, and the air smelled of smoke and dust. Jack stirred first, rubbing the sleep from his eyes, his back stiff from the wooden floor. The girl was still there, wrapped in his blanket, her breathing steadier now. When she woke, her gaze drifted around the room, confusion first, then memory. She sat up slowly, clutching the blanket around her shoulders. Jack handed her a tin cup of water. You should drink. You lost near everything in that desert. She nodded faintly, her hands trembling as she drank. My name is Tala, she said at last, her voice soft but steady. My people were Comanche. The way she said were made Jack's gut tighten. What happened? He asked carefully. Tala's eyes grew distant, fixed on something far beyond the cabin walls. Soldiers came at dawn. We had no warning. My brother tried to fight, but they shot him. My mother, she told me to run. Her voice broke. They burned everything. Jack stared into the fire, his jaw clenched. He didn't need to ask which soldiers. He already knew. The bluecoats, the U.S. cavalry, the same men he had once ridden with, the same banner he'd once saluted. He stood abruptly and walked to the window, trying to hide the storm of guilt in his face. His reflection in the cracked glass looked like a ghost. A man caught between sins and redemption. Tala, he said quietly. I used to wear that same uniform, rode with the army for 5 years. Her eyes lifted to him, wide with disbelief and pain. The silence stretched between them, heavy as the air before a storm. For a moment she said nothing. Then softly, You were one of them? Jack's throat felt tight. I was, he admitted. But not anymore. Not since I saw what they did. Tala looked at him for a long moment, searching his face. Finally she whispered, You saved me. That is what I know. Her words hit him harder than any bullet. Forgiveness, and pure and undeserved, in me flickered in her eyes. Jack turned away, blinking back tears he hadn't let fall in years. Outside, the desert sun climbed higher. But inside the cabin, something even brighter began to stir. The fragile start of understanding. The sky turned dark long before evening. Heavy clouds rolled in from the west, thick and gray, rumbling with thunder. The scent of rain, rare and sharp, drifted through the air. Jack stood by the doorway of the old shack, watching the horizon. He hadn't seen a real storm in months, but tonight it seemed the whole sky wanted to break open. Inside, Tala sat by the dying fire, her strength returning a little more each day. She was wrapped in his blanket, her dark hair falling loose over her shoulders. The color had returned to her cheeks, but her eyes still carried the sadness of someone who had lost everything. You'll be all right now, Jack said, glancing over his shoulder. Storm will pass. Then you can find your people, what's left of them. She looked up at him, her voice quiet but firm. And you? You will leave? Jack hesitated, his hat in his hands. Ain't got much reason to stay. I was never good at settling anywhere. Too many ghosts trail me. The rain began to fall then, slow, heavy drops tapping against the tin roof. Tala stood, walking closer. You carry guilt, she said softly. But guilt does not bring back the dead. He gave a faint, broken smile. No, but maybe it keeps a man from becoming worse than he already is. Lightning flashed, painting their faces in white light. For a moment, neither spoke. The thunder rolled through the hills like the sound of old memories refusing to die. Tala reached out, placing her hand over his. You saved me, Jack Callahan. Whatever you did before, and that is not who you are now. Her touch was warm, steady. He wanted to believe her, but part of him couldn't. Maybe, he whispered. But I reckon redemption's a long road, and I'm only just startin'. She smiled faintly. Then ride it well. When the rain thickened, he saddled his horse. The world outside was silver with storm water. Tala stood in the doorway, watching him mount. He looked back once, his heart heavy. Take care, Tala, he said. I will, and you, don't run from the man you've become. Jack tipped his hat and rode into the rain. The storm swallowed him whole, but in its roar, he found a strange peace, as if the sky itself was washing him clean. He didn't look back, yet somehow he knew he'd been forgiven.